presented and worked on the bill, House Bill 2232, to get it through. Ian tells me it was a great thing to do, so I'm sure that it will be a great thing to do. I think it hopefully will put some authority in the hands of people who actually need to be able to control it. So anyway, thank you for having me today.
Well, Barrett, I don't think I see Barrett on the call yet. He was traveling, so he might be logging in late. So we'll go to Dustin James.
Now you can see me.
Oh, yeah.
How are you guys today?
Doing good.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Maybe see me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Introduction, Dustin James, Outlaw Motorsports, ATV dealer here in Eastern Oregon. So Honda, Yamaha, Arctic Cat, avid rider, enthusiast, racer. That's it.
Cool. And I think Jody's trying to get logged in right now, so we'll skip him and we'll go to Colleen.
Colleen O'Hogan, Transportation Safety Office. We were moved in under DMV 3 years ago. I do the roadway safety program, work zone program, and the vehicle equipment safety standards program. And our office used to have the rules for these ATVs.
Cool. And Grace?
Hi, everybody. I'm Grace Schuessler. I'm the Oregon Program Manager for Tread Lightly. I work directly with Ian on a lot of different projects, particularly around Bend and Redmond. But yeah, just happy to be here to learn and give insight where I can.
Well, Charlie Day?
Yeah, I'm the president of 501c3 nonprofit Oregon Dunes Responsible Management Corporation, and I'm a nearby landowner, and my family has been involved with this property for 100 years this year. And we're in the south sector of the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area.
Great. And Don Nelson?
Hi, I'm Dawn Nelson. I live out near Sand Lake Rec area, and I'm representing the Sand Lake Community Group.
Great, thanks. And is Rich, I don't know if Rich Burkholder is on yet either. So we'll skip to Shane Gill.
Yeah, hey everybody, Shane Gill, U.S. Forest Service, Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area. I'm located here in Reedsport and been involved in the OHV realm here for many years, particularly sound testing. So hopefully I'll have something to add and help out today.
Great, thanks, Shane. And next would Alan Young.
Hi, I'm also Young with the United States Forest Service. On the Sisseton National Forest and stationed up in Hebo with a primary focus on patrolling Sand Lake Recreation Area in Cloverdale, Oregon.
Cool. And Lieutenant Clint.
Hey, Clint Galusha, Oregon State Police, currently acting as our wildlife lieutenant, and I work on the contracts with the Oregon Parks for ATV enforcement around the state.
Great. And Bradley?
Good afternoon. I'm Bradley Kay, the Lane County Sheriff's Office. I patrol the Florence ODRNA.
Cool. And TJ?
Hi, I'm TJ Riley. I'm on the RTP committee. I'm also the vice president of the Oregon State Snowmobile Association. In addition, I'm a Oregon State certified snowmobile safety instructor. So I hope to chime in on some safety issues later on here. And I actually do most of the safety certifications for young people in the state of Oregon.
Great. And Tim Custer?
Good afternoon. It's Tim Custer with the RTP committee as a motorized rep.
Cool. And we'll do staff introductions. So I'll start with myself. My name is Ian Caldwell. I work the ATV program coordinator. I'm focused out of Central Oregon area and been with Parks for 22 years with the mainly the grant program. And then and we have Mike Law. He's not here today, but he was focused more on the west side of the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Yes, hi, I'm Jeff Trejo. I'm the ATV Safety Education Coordinator for Oregon State Parks. I've been in this position since 2014.
Good. And Michelle?
Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Scalise. I'm the manager of the Grants and Community Programs section at OPRD, and ATV program is in this section. I've been with OPRD for 28 years. Thanks for joining us.
Great. And Katie?
Hi, Katie Gauthier. I'm the Government Relations and Policy Manager and have been with OPRD about 8 years. So I do our rulemaking and legislative work and oversee our policy and communications teams.
Cool. All right. So that's all our introductions. So kind of we're gonna have a meeting. We got quite a few people here, so we kind of have some ground rules that we are kind of going over. So we want to have respectful discussions. You know, recognize that people have a lot of diverse backgrounds and from what we like to recreate and live kind of daily lives, and we want to be have a consideration of the impact and the implementation of what we were talking about today. So today, what we're doing is it's recommendations to staff. So we're not going to be voting on stuff, and we don't have to have consensus on everything. But we want to hear different perspectives, you know, from neighboring landowners, from law enforcement to riders of how that impacts their riding and working on vehicles and stuff. So, so what we'll be doing today is we're going to have we'll be doing editing. We'll look at the rules, the draft language, and doing some editing on that. And we want to really be focused on the big picture. So, you know, the concept of what sort of sound level we're at and how we do breaks or flags or something like that. It may change. So everything that we're going to do, what we're gonna have to consider it, and then it's going to be run by our Department of Justice to make sure we have all the proper wording there. So if you do notice something, a kind of little wordsmith thing, it's kind of good to hear about that, but we don't have to get super focused on the details of the individual words. So and then at the end, Katie's going to go over some of the financial and economic impacts, and that she's got to build a statement of what the impacts of what we're doing would be. So, and it looks like Barrett just joined us. Barrett, if you're trying to get logged on, can you introduce yourself real quick? You're on mute right now. Barrett, you were on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry for the delay. Barrett Brown, Class 3 rep, ATV Grant and Advisory Committees, Land Use Director for the Oregon Motorcycle Riders Association, and the Lobos Motorcycle Club.
Oh, great. Katie, I don't know if we've got Jody Phillipson yet. If you want to check his email, his email address is Jody.
She's doing that. I sent her information, Ian.
Okay, sometimes we've had the wrong without the C at the start of it. So
okay,
cool.
I have that.
Okay. All right. So the list of rules. So we want to be respectful. No personal attacks, insults, or inflammatory language will be tolerated. Want to be understanding. Everybody recreates outside in different ways, and we are all visitors and stewards of our natural places. We want to use the raise your hand feature. It's hard when there's a lot of screens and you just physically raise it, but if you do that, I know sometimes it's difficult to speak and if one person's talking a lot, but just raise your hand and then it actually numbers them who's first, and so then I'll try to call on those people to have your say. So mute your mic when you're not speaking, just so it doesn't pick up any background noise or anything. And we want to stay on topic, and if we start going too far off topic, we can kind of parking lot that and come back to it and revisit it. You can ask questions. So there's a questions, I think, button down at the bottom of your screen. And so I think Katie's going to try to monitor that, and she might read some questions out loud too. So I just want to remind everybody the meeting's being recorded on YouTube, so it should be broadcasting live right now, and it'll be in the future be viewable for other people to see what we talked about in today's meeting. So I want to get a little history about the program. So we had some pretty good legislation back in 1986. We created our ATV grants program, and what that program did is created a ATV permit, a sticker that people would put on their vehicles from motorcycles, ATVs, Jeeps, and sand rails. And those cost $10 for 2 years, and which is actually a pretty good price. But really, what comes from that is fuel tax dollars. So we count all the active permits every year, and then we add that up, and we have a calculation of how much fuel vehicles burn from motorcycles, Jeeps, side-by-sides, ATVs. They're all a little bit different amounts. So we crank out that formula. Just kind of on average, it's about $100 for every sticker. So we get $100 of fuel taxes that goes into the state park program. So when you pay at the pump, buy gasoline, it's 40 cents a gallon, goes to the ODOT, and that's for road maintenance and that kind of stuff. But since the ATVs are operating on dirt trails and in the woods and stuff, then the share of those funds goes into our program. So that originally was under the ownership of ODOT, and I remember back in the 80s submitting grants to, or actually 90s, submitting grants to ODOT to when I worked on the Tillamook State Forest. So they managed that program, but in 2000 that program got switched over to state parks. So state parks, we now have the permit sales, and Michelle works a lot with that, and have a couple staff that works with vendors to get those permits to people. Our biggest part of our program is providing funding. So about 60% of our funds goes to operation and maintenance, and about 30% goes to law enforcement, and about 10% goes to other projects. So we work very closely with both our operation and maintenance and law enforcement people. And we'll be talking more about law enforcement today, but we fund a lot of county sheriff's offices for them to patrol specific riding areas. We also fund state police. We fund the equivalent of 2 full-time troopers, but there's 120 some troopers throughout the state of Oregon, and so they kind of piecemeal some time together. They'll do some ATV specific stuff. So but then people like Shane Gill manages like the DNRA and different riding areas for daily operations, do trail grooming and stuff, and do other things like sound testing and public contacts. So, and in 2000, the sound levels and equipment standards stayed with DEQ and OPRD. So in 2007, we had some new legislation with safety laws, and so that safety law said that um, motorcycle riders, ATV riders, and kids on side-by-sides, they had to get a safety education card. And we phased that in. So the first year it was just youth had to get it. And over 5 years, we phased in ages for adults. So now that's currently the law that every person in Oregon, if they're operating on public lands, has to have a safety education card. And there's a second part for youth. They actually have to have a hands-on training, but that we have an online thing. It's totally free. And we do education on there about from safety stuff to environmental ethics and whatnot. So 2011, we also had some legislation about creating a class 4 vehicle. So at the time, the side-by-sides, we call them class 4, were just under Jeeps and sand rails. And that was we broke that out to a different category. So, but over the last 10 years, we worked a lot with our ATV advisory committee. So we have a 17-panel advisory committee. Several of you are on that currently right now. So there's a larger advisory committee that makes recommendations on like safety stuff and different rules. And then we have a grant subcommittee of 7 people, and that they review all of our grant applications and have a public meeting, and they make recommendations on funding for that. So, so one of the things that both of those committees, the large full advisory committee and the grant subcommittee meeting, have been talking about over years is trying to look at the sound levels. And one of the big talking points was like a 96 decibel level, which we'll get more into the details of. But this last legislation, Virgil, he introduced himself. He is a state representative out of Roseburg, and he introduced a bill, House Bill 2232, which that changed that, went back from when 2000, those standards, he transferred those and worked actually with Barrett Brown, and they got that language switched to state parks who would make those rules. So, and I think we had a couple people join us. I think I saw Jody and Rich Burkholder. So Jody, would you like to introduce yourself? Jody, you're on mute right now. And we'll come back to you. Rich, do you want to unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi, guys. Sorry, I'm at the front counter right now. I had to help out with the employees, but I'm the owner at Spin Rail Dune Buggy here in Coos Bay, and work very closely with Forest Service and state parks and a lot of the team members that are on here and folks that have been in the industry for a while. Proud to give a little assistance and a little bit of our view of things and work well with everybody, and we're happy to be here.
Great, thanks, Rich. Jody, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jody Phillips. I represent rural fire, but I've been extremely active in the ODNRA because I live here in Coos Bay, and this is all of this is just music to my ears. It's something we've been fighting. I work with Shane a lot and dealing with the noise issues and the local folks. And this is something that's been needing in the Forest Service. I'm sure Shane will say later, explain later on, but it was awfully hard for them to deal with because there were so doggone many different noise levels for different vehicles and of course the enforcement. So I'm all over this. So thank you guys.
Cool. Great. So just for everybody, if you want to talk, it works best to, there's a little raise your hand button at the bottom of your Zoom thing, I think. So we'll try to use that to, and then I'll try to call on people as they raise their hands. So let's see. So kind of a review what we're going to be talking about today. I kind of broke it out in 3 different sections. So the first one is definitions, and that's just kind of looking at some of the like we call class 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and then ODOT was using like multi-wheeled vehicles. So we'll go through that, and so that's going to be a little more technical stuff, and we'll crank through that pretty quick, I think. There's a few things with equipment standards. Looking at the brake, what it says for brakes, also flags. But then there's just some inconsistencies with other states and some stuff about headlights. And then tethers. TJ brought something up about tethers used on snowmobiles, which I did not put it in that draft rule, but we'll go ahead and talk about that when we get to that. And then the last part will be sound levels. So we're talking about the 96 decibel level is what's been discussed. So kind of put that at the end, but we want to make sure we get through everything. And then we need to make sure we save some time because Katie's going to be talking about the financial impact and how we write that up. So sound levels, let's see. Okay, I want to go a little more detail on sound levels before I dig it, because I'm going to open up a Word document and we're going to get into the details of words and buried in that. But I did want to talk a little bit about the sound levels, and we have a lot of different sound levels throughout the states. The ODNRA, so basically from Florence down to the Coos Bay area, is at 93 decibels, and that's a 20-inch 20 inches away from the exhaust at a 45-degree angle. There's the whole process of how to test that. So Sand Lake is 97. And then a couple years ago, Coos County actually wrote a sound ordinance that would be 96 if you're in Coos County. And then we do have one area, it's BLM land in Central Oregon. It's actually where my side-by-side is. That's out in Flying Buttes area. And when the BLM did their resource management plan, I think there were some neighboring houses in that area, so they went for the 96 decibel level. So this chart on the right, we kind of created that for our website and have that information out so that originally people just kind of were stuck on the 99 decibels for all vehicles were 99. And I think it related back to the 90s or the 80s. I should go all the way back to the 80s when we had the three-wheelers and technically those were considered motorcycles. And so and that was pre-quad. So most of the vehicles, ATVs and three-wheelers were all 99 decibels. But as the quads came out, ATV quads, those technically were considered a mid-engine vehicle. And so as we looked at the rules, we actually realized that ATVs and actually side-by-sides is at 97. And then front engine vehicles like trucks and SUVs, they were at 95 decibels. So once we started publishing that and made that more recognizable, that kind of created some confusion because there's a bunch of just different levels. And so part of the effort is to have more of one consistent sound level across the state. I've been doing a lot of research the last couple months. I've been studying a lot of stuff. I found 10 other states besides Oregon that are at 96 decibels. So closest to us is California and Idaho and Nevada. They're all 96. And then a little further out is New Mexico, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Maine, and Michigan. So those are the main ones. I can't tell you what every other state is if they're 99 or what that. So, but there's been some studies. California did a lot of research into, and there's actually a whole study. It's online. I can get that for people if they want it, but that looks at that 96 decibel level. So that I'm going to pull up my Word document and let's get in the nitty gritty of looking at the languages. So can you guys see my text now? Somebody nod their head.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the document that I sent out to you, the first page of it, it was just created as a supplement or like a summary of what it was. Colleen, yes?
I'm sorry, you don't have chat featured anywhere. I can't find it. And I just needed to step away for a second. And so I just was trying to tell you I want to step away for a second and I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, we do actually for public meetings, it's our policy to turn chat off because it's been abused sometimes in the past meetings. So we don't have that. I think we have question and answers. I think that feature is available, but
I wanted to say I'm stepping away. I will be right back. But
okay.
I do want to comment on some of this stuff, so I'll be right back.
Okay. So this first page is just it's a summary of like the different points. So this is not really going to be in our final editing or final draft stuff. So, but as we scroll down, so ODOT, their rules are in 736. So I want to step back one more level. So we have statutes. Statutes are written by legislators like Virgil, and they can also be written through, I think, a voting process when we vote on the ballots and stuff. And so the statutes are kind of state laws but then we have rules, Oregon administrative rules, and those rules are written by agencies, and the statutes usually give an agency authority to write rules for certain things. And so ODOT has their administrative rules where they talk about driver's licenses and loading trucks and all that stuff. That's well, they have several spots, but the stuff related to ATV stuff is in 735. Our state park stuff, all of our stuff is in 736. So that's Oregon Administrative Rule 736. And then section 004 is our ATV stuff. And then, so in the start of that, we have definitions. And so oftentimes, an agency might have to give special definitions for words that aren't defined anyplace else. So one of the things we actually like to do is not to repeat a definition if it's already in statute. And we actually had this problem with the class 1, 2, 3. We actually repeated it in here and recently switched it over just to reference the where it's listed in statute. Yeah, so we have like here class 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so in ODOT's rules and their OARs, they actually defined motorcycles and off-road vehicles, and they defined like multi-wheeled vehicles as like a class 1 vehicle or similar. So we needed to merge what ODOT had and put it into our stuff. So the initial spot is that. So as we scroll down, we don't really have any edits until we get to off-road vehicle. And so we use this language as what ODOT originally had. The importance of the off-road vehicle means any motorized vehicle capable of cross-country travel or immediately over land, water, sand, snow, ice, marsh, swampland, or other natural terrain. And that's important because that actually includes snowmobiles. And a lot of the rules that were written did not really include them. And so we need to be thinking about that. So we included, that's a new definition, and that changed it bumped them all down to different levels. So TJ, go ahead.
Does does electric vehicles qualify as a motor vehicle, like electric bikes?
Yes. Well, there's definitions. So there's definitions for like electric bicycle, and there's definitions like for motor assisted scooters. There's been language for micro mobility devices, which did not make it through legislature, but like an electric motorcycle, they would actually just fall under the motorcycle category because it has an engine and is propelled by an engine. So okay, so we're gonna renumber, we start changing renumbering stuff, and that's minor. We also threw in the definition of snowmobile, and here again, instead of spelling it all out, we wrote, we're referencing the definition. So in case the legislature changes that definition in the future, it would automatically change and we would not have to go back through rulemaking. And that was it. So, any questions on that?
No, I just wanted, when he asked about electric, if you think about electric vehicles that we have on the road, they're considered vehicles. So if you're trying to make that connection.
Yeah. And so, and for us, like from bicycles to motorcycles, our main cutoff is pedals versus foot pegs. And so like an e-bike, a lot of times those, well, there's actually new definitions for e-bikes. There's class 1, 2, and 3. The class 1 goes 20 miles an hour with pedal assist. Class 2 is pedal assist or throttle up to 20. And then class 3 is 28 miles an hour, only pedal assist. Pretty much anything else, other motorcycles and stuff that don't fall into that would either be considered a moped or else a motorcycle. And if those are operating on highways, then on roads and towns, they have to have a license plate, and motorcycles need to have a motorcycle endorsement. But if they're operated in the woods, then they're fall under our ATV definitions. Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on. So this next section, like I said before, we copied ODOT's rules and put them in ours. So what we added them to the end of our section of Division 4, and then we created the last part of this number here, 150, and then sound level is going to be 160. And so we are trying to ODOT's had these rules out for 25, 35 years. So and they tend to be working okay. So I did not want to change them around as that much. Just if things didn't quite make sense, then I wanted to look at them. So the first thing we were looking at is the original language said all vehicles must have disc or drum brakes that are operable and effective in bringing a vehicle to the stop. And I'll try to zoom this in a little bit here. And as I was looking at that, I actually have a one wheel. It's like a little motorized skateboard thing. And that actually does not have disc or drum brakes. And so that's an electric powered vehicle and it uses engine braking to stop. I don't know where the future of electric vehicles is going. I know it's a huge technology and a lot of things are happening. And so I was like, well, what if there's a braking system that's not disc or drum? Can we have that? And so I was proposing just to remove that. And then I'll get to you in a second, Virgil. And then Colleen took a look at that, and she actually mentioned that we should look at ORS 815.125 and reference that. And that would basically have standards for like having one or two brakes and parking brakes for vehicles except motorcycles and that stuff. So I've rewritten this to say brakes, all vehicles must have a minimum brakes as described in ORS 815.125. So Virgil, you had your hand up. Did you have a question, comment?
Yeah, Ian, thank you. I haven't looked at ORS 815.125, but there are some vehicles that use brakes at the drive line, the drivetrain, like a transfer case, or some of the drag cars actually don't have brakes out at the drums or the wheel bearings. So I don't know if you want to just define it as just minimum have brakes. I think it might make the most sense rather than go into the details because I guess kind of makes sense. That's all.
Okay. Colleen, do you want to respond to that?
Well, did he say just have brakes and not put the ORS, the statute in there? Was that the comment? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, I haven't read the statute yet. I just know that I'm assuming that because ODOT, has evolved the ORS, that it probably is written toward vehicles that are not completely off-road, and there are some vehicles that are off-road that do not use brakes at the wheels. They have brakes on the drivetrain itself, and much like what you just said about the electric vehicles. But if you can picture military vehicles, the big trucks, their brakes are actually at the differential, not at the wheel, and they're not technically street legal, but it's military, so they do whatever they want.
Having been in the military and driven a lot of those vehicles, yes, I can imagine them. I was going to, the reason I raised my hand is I was going to encourage everyone to take a look at the statute. And the reason that I recommend putting the statute in there is, again, if they change the statute, it's quite long. I mean, and it describes, and I also, Ian had originally left in, and bringing the vehicle to a stop, but I feel like it describes bringing the vehicle to a stop. It's redundancy.
Yeah, so I spent a little time kind of reading through this 125 section, and it talks about motorcycles and mopeds shall have at least one brake, maybe operated by hand or foot. There's just a number of things. I think down at the bottom it says vehicles under 8,000 pounds must be able to brake from a speed of 20 miles an hour to stop within 25 feet. I think as I read through this, I'm like, well, this all makes sense, and I think it'd be.
Yeah, I don't feel it's so prescriptive that it would rule out the types of brakes, Virgil, that you're describing, that it would be inclusive. But again, that's why I want everyone, because we're all coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. I want to encourage everyone to take a look at the statute and say, does this, exclude the type of off-road vehicle that I might bring to the table? And if so, what would we want to, how would we want to rewrite this? Because I want to keep the statute in there, but then maybe add another rule or add to this particular rule.
TJ, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just looked at the statute, and there's nothing in there in the statute that's that specific as far as a wheel or anything else. So it pretty well covers any type of braking system. It just basically says that the brakes have to work, but it doesn't define the brakes. So I think it's fine.
Okay. I have a question, Ian.
Sure.
My concern is six. Let's see. Every motor vehicle, combination motor vehicle except mopeds and motorcycles shall at all times be equipped with a parking brake system. Parking brake system required by this subsection must meet, and it goes on. I didn't realize there was actually a parking brake requirement for an off-road vehicle outside of mopeds. I mean, I guarantee you there's not a sandrail on the dunes that has a parking brake on it. And for that matter, there is no side-by-side that I'm aware of that has a parking brake either. At least not any of the newer stuff.
So I think for side-by-sides, when you shift it into park, that's considered a parking brake.
Well, we better be pretty darn specific then. Does that mean that if the sandrail, the ignition is turned off and it's in first gear, that that's considered a parking brake?
I don't think so. Tim, do you?
Pauline, you're on mute.
That might require reading the manufacturer's manual.
Well, the manufacturer of a sandrail is the guy that built it, and they're not built with parking brakes.
I don't know. My brother did handrails. I don't know.
They've never been built with parking brakes, to the best of my knowledge. Every one of them that I've built ever had a parking brake. So, and again, this is stuff that I don't really think that is going to be enforced anyway. I mean, it's just the small print, but why not take it out? I don't see any reason why an off-road vehicle should have a parking brake requirement, and I'm happy to change the statute if I need to do that on a legislative level.
Okay, let's go to Dustin and then Tim.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just going to kind of expand on what was just said from the ATV side-by-side world, right? There's probably 50% of the side-by-side models that do not have parking brakes anymore. They all have parking positions, so there's a way to lock it, but definitely not brakes. So yeah, I would say that if that could be reworded or just omitted completely, then I think that would be accurate. But yeah, there's parking brakes is maybe 50-50 out there in the four-wheeled world.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, we've built over 30 rails over the years, never put a parking brake on one, and mine now doesn't have one. So you put the transmission in park, but never a parking brake.
Do we have a definition on what a parking brake is?
Yeah, it pretty much says right underneath 6 what it is, and I don't know of very many vehicles that'll meet those.
Now, underneath it's talking about improper brakes. Do we have parking brake definition?
Yeah, 6A and B.
Yeah, like 6A says the system must be adequate to hold the vehicle on any grade.
Yes, but if you put it in park or if you put it in first gear and shut it off, you see what I'm saying?
Mechanically, though, I guess I'm asking the group is when you put the parking brake on, is that only engine compression holding it, or is there some sort of a engine locker?
So let me expand just a little bit on this, Ian. Sorry. first off, do you have the ability to change this ORS on this, or drop it out of the rulemaking?
No.
Or is, what's
No,
that?
no, we do not. So the ORS, we're not changing any ORS, just the OARs. So the original language basically just said that you have to have a disc or drum brake in working condition. And my proposal is to drop disc and drum, and then Colleen weighed in to add this 815-125. So we can keep it at the original language. We can remove the disc or drum, or we can make.
Well, I think disc or drum is pretty safe because every vehicle pretty much has a disc or a drum brake. You know, off-road vehicle, even the ones that use a disc or a drum at the drivetrain rather than at the wheel. But I sure don't want to add a statute to this thing that will make virtually everybody on the sand dunes outlaws. And this statute, just that 6A and B, will make probably 80% of everybody out there an outlaw, and myself included.
Yeah, me too.
So then the recommendation would be to have a braking system that can bring the vehicle to a complete stop?
No, it's two different things. The braking system, obviously, you have to have a braking system, but it's the emergency brake is a holding brake. It's not something that you use to bring yourself to a stop.
You missed my. So this would read, all vehicles must have a braking system that could effectively bring the vehicle to a stop.
That works fine, and that's just common sense.
That was the original language. So if we didn't change anything, it would say all vehicles must have disc or drum brakes that are operable and effective in bringing the vehicle to a stop. So I saw Barrett had his hand up for a minute, and then Clint. So Barrett, did you still have a comment?
You pretty much addressed it. I think that's what I would do, is just at a minimum, brakes must be operable and effective to bring to a stop. Just leave what you have here, but eliminate disc or drum and the ORS reference would be my recommendation.
Okay. Clint, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the opposite of that. I agree with Virgil on the parking brake. You could either put in your own definitions, brake, and leave that out and don't reference the ORS up at the top, or I would suggest leave the disc or drum brakes as it defines what type of brakes they are. If you just say brakes, I would question without any stopping distance of any kind. Technically, just taking your foot off the gas will eventually bring your vehicle to a stop. So I know it says effective stop, but it's still sort of vague to me. So I would prefer probably the disc and drum brake and or a definition at the top that works for you guys.
Okay. And Dustin?
I mean, I'm just gonna expand on that. I mean, in the world of the electric side of things, we are going to get to a point where there potentially won't be disc or drum. So I don't even know if that's something you need to cross that bridge right now. I mean, as we stand currently, short of like the one wheel, that's all you're going to be up against. But there's certain other applications out there that are using generative energy in the electric motors to stop them, and it's not necessarily a drum or a disc. But how far do you want to predict the future on the designations here?
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up, because one wheel, and you can stop really fast with that braking power. And I crystal ball, I'm thinking in the future we're going to have more vehicles, especially smaller motorcycles and stuff like that. But if we left it in, and then like later we can always reopen rulemaking. But yeah, Colleen.
I'm not out there anymore. I just have no desire to be out there anymore riding ATVs. But some of you guys are out there, whether you're riding or you're enforcing. If you leave this too open, there are a number of people, I'm going to guess, because I've been in law enforcement and I've been in the military and I've been out in the world, And there are always people who are going to take it as far as they can take it. And if you leave it too open for interpretation, and that's kind of in the, was it Clint? You were kind of leaving it, we're commenting that if you leave it open for interpretation, people are going to take it to the limit. And we have to be concerned about safety. And it's going to be the safety of maybe the children or the other people that are out there. I mean, I have had friends who have died out there. I've been to their funerals, because somebody wasn't safe while they were riding their ATVs. So, we have to consider that people do die out there.
Yeah.
And that's what our office, I mean, I'm working on, risky behavior on public roads, but my mind is about risky behavior. And so however you guys choose to write this, I mean, Ian, you're correct. These rules haven't been overhauled in a lot of years and they need it. But however you choose to rewrite these, you have to consider the safety of it and how you write them and how open you leave them could lead to some safety issues.
Okay. Virgil and then Barrett.
Okay, so I think we're getting into the weeds. This is two completely different topics. If you obviously you got to have brakes. It's the e-brake part that I have concerns with, or sorry, emergency brake. That's just not a possible. I mean, it's a law that cannot be conformed to, and it's a law that's completely unnecessary. It would be fine and is a law on the street, but off-road, it's completely unnecessary. And by putting this into something, all we're doing is we are going to make a situation where now you're going to get another ticket on top of whatever you got pulled over for. And it's counterproductive. And honestly, it's going to create this humongous uproar of really ticked off people that are not breaking the law now. And this is a law that's been around forever. Do you have to have brakes? You better have brakes for sure. It's the e-brake thing that's the problem. I don't really think people need a definition of what kind of brakes they need to have. If they're going to do anything, they just need to know they need brakes. But you'd be a complete fool not to have brakes. Not saying there's not complete fools out there, but this law is not going to save one single life. Having an e-brake is not going to make a difference. You're just going to create a manufacturer issue. They can't conform to this law. So every vehicle that you sell, every side-by-side that you sell will be now breaking Oregon ORS because it's sold into this, and you're going to push people in a direction you don't want to push. So I don't even know why this got brought up. I think this should just be back to what it was, and it should go away. And that's my 2 cents, and thank you, and I'm sorry, and I don't want to get into the weeds. We got a lot to do.
Okay, we do need to kind of wrap this conversation up and keep moving on, but Barrett, you did have your hand. Did you have a last comment?
I think Virgil, the parking brake's already been taken off the table as near as I can tell from the commenters that have contributed so far. I think it's mainly a question of whether we need to stick with a particular type of brake device description, or just if braking system is sufficient. I think the number of people who are going to be engaged in this activity with no braking system could not be more de minimis. Somebody who merely decelerates by taking their foot off their gas, that person doesn't exist and won't exist. Or the person who's going to argue in court that dragging their feet is a braking system. I think a braking system is pretty definitive when it comes to safety. The person that Colleen might be describing is taking it to the limit. Somebody who has no brakes, I don't see that personally.
And I think now we're seeing a lot more manufactured vehicles. The side-by-sides have taken over a lot of the home custom built sand rails. So I think we're just seeing more and more production vehicles that are going to have that. So from today, we're not going to make any decisions. We're not going to vote on any of these. And we will put together a version of this for the public comment. And I'll be talking with staff of how we address this exactly. So I'm going to move on. So we kept chain guard as is. Fire extinguisher, I needed to make a change on this. So the way that the language said is vehicles except motorcycles and multi-wheeled vehicles, which is the ATVs. It said that they need to have fire extinguishers. So that's something that I know we put in our information. If you've got a side-by-side or a Jeep or sand rail, you have to have a fire extinguisher. But that in the snowmobile world, since they fall under this umbrella, snowmobile, this is actually saying that snowmobiles would have to carry a fire extinguisher. But I kind of flipped this around. It says fire extinguishers. So it says class 2 and 4 vehicles must be equipped with a functional fire extinguisher. So basically keeping the law the same as it has been, it's just rewording that. Our next one, and this, we might get into the weeds on this one too. So our next one is flags. Let me roll this to the top. So let me zoom in a little bit here. So it was brought to my attention that people use American flags, that they have American flags on their vehicle. And I start checking in with all the different places up and down the coast with the different counties of what their policy is for types of flags. And I contacted the sheriff of Lake County, which oversees Christmas Valley also. And all the agencies are allowing an American flag to be flown and on the ground. So this comment doesn't the way the language is written is kind of vague of whether like does the American flag work or not. And I've had some people explain to me like I did all the math of like it needs such and such square inches for that. So I tried to make it more clear that like if your flag has 36 square inches of red or orange, then it would be acceptable, which is essentially what is happening on the ground now with law enforcement. So the second part of this is I kept doing more research of like what are other states doing, and I found like California, Idaho, Washington, and I think there was maybe Arizona have like some sand riding areas that they require flags. All those other states require the flag to be 8 feet off the ground instead of 9 feet, and they require it to be 6 inches. The way this language says 6 inches wide, but I've been learning about flag standards, and flag wide is up and down, and then and at least 12 inches long. And so all the other states say 6 inches, and Oregon says 8 inches. And through work, sometimes I go to sand dunes and I've had to buy a flag at the last minute because I go to the dunes and I don't have a flag. So I bought several on the fly and came back and started measuring them, and like half the flags are like 6 or 7 inches tall or wide as they said. So I'm like, well, I think we should be consistent with other states. And because if you get checked in one state and then you go to another state and like they check me. So to be honest with you, and I've talked to law enforcement, nobody's out measuring people's flags. And so it's a little bit of a, is it really that big of a deal? But if practically on the ground, that's how things are getting managed, I think we should try to have our law match things that are on the ground. So I did a little more math, and I found an American flag and did some measuring of that and everything. And so American flag, if you have a 12-inch wide flag, the way flags are standardized, it would be 8 inches tall. So if you have a 12 by 8 inch tall flag, that and you 40% of a US flag is red. And so if you do the math, it works out to be like 38 square inches. And if you do the math of a triangle, 6 inches tall and 12 inches wide, that is a 36 inch. So this American flag is 8 by 12, and this has more red than what a standard flag is. Comments, questions? Sounds like everybody's good with that. All right. We'll move on. So floor and foot pads. I think this is just kind of, oh, Alan, go ahead.
Hey, Ann. So talking about reducing the size of the flag and then how high it is, like if you look back at the photo at the beginning of your presentation, you saw where some of the side-by-sides were parked on that micro train. And I don't think lowering that visibility is beneficial to the public. Like a lot of people, as they're coming over the micro train, they rely on seeing that flag ahead so they can make adjustments and prevent those near misses. So I think that would be a safe concern by bringing that flags down lower. Like on that photo there, if you look at the far left side, that flag was now another foot lower. You know, it could be hidden in that beach grass. And then now you have potential for a collision.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that, Virgil?
Yeah, so I missed some of what you said about the flag height, but there are other states that have an 8-foot flag height. First off, I don't think anybody's ever going to get a ticket for having their flag a foot lower, you know, because nobody's going to measure it. But in the event that you did get a group of people coming into the dunes that were from, like, say, Nevada, where the flag height is 8 feet, they're going to all be breaking the law again at 8 feet. So I personally, I mean, I've ridden the dunes for the last 35 years, and we've always had a flag at whatever, 9 feet, whatever the poles are. I don't know that 1 foot's going to make a difference, but I like the 8 foot.
Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, so this is from a dealer standpoint that, you know, we sit nestled in between, you know, Oregon, Washington, Idaho. Granted, we only have 2 sand dunes that are close to us, but conformity between states, you know, is a big deal, I guess, from my standpoint, as I see, you know, riders coming from 3 different states on any given week, and there's constantly confusion about, well, what state requires this, what state requires that. So for me, I feel like matching that with Idaho, Washington, surrounding places, I feel I'm in favor of that myself. I don't know that the 1 foot difference is going to make a true, honest to God difference out there. So, I mean, as a dealer and, you know, streamlining it for proper participation of the people without just being an outlaw, I think conformity is best in this situation.
Okay. Bradley and then Barrett.
I agree. A foot's not really going to make a difference. The main reason we are out there looking for those is for the people that have, you know, like the 1 foot flags that you're not going to be able to see anyways. So we have a standard to actually enforce and tell them to fix their flags.
Okay, Barrett.
Yeah, just yeah, somebody who I took at least 10 years off my life working on our current youth safety legislation, and these things matter a lot to me, but I think the most effective safety regulations are ones that are easy to comply with, easy to understand, and I think being an outlier, and this probably doesn't make sense, so I like the conformity across the region, and appreciate your legwork in general and your direction on this, Ian.
Okay. I do want to add too, is a lot of people have lighted whips that like have all kinds of flashy lights on it, and those are pretty popular out in the dunes. And I had somebody ask me about that. Would that be okay, or do you want to make a law that says that? Because sometimes they're even brighter, especially after hours. And so I started digging into it. It's like, well, if we allow lighted whips, then we have to say a certain lumen or wattage or how bright those are. And then I actually talked to another officer about that, and he made a comment of when you stop your vehicle and you're over the other side of a sand dune or on top of it, You turn it off, all your lights are going to go off, and then you're not going to see that, and you don't have a flag that's there. And so because of those, and most of the lighted whips are not 4 feet, not quite tall enough. So so I just kind of took that off the table. Bradley?
I think those would be good to require at night. Flags are near impossible to see if it's after hours and the sun's down. Those would be a good thing to have at night. But during the daytime, like you said, you can't hardly see them at all without a flag on them.
So currently, what the law says about lights is you have to have them a half an hour after sunset. And so you do have to have lights like headlights and taillights. But if we open, that would be I think a whole nother level if we're requiring lighted whips after hours for a lot of people.
We should probably keep moving, Ian, to
Okay. Thank you, Katie, keeping me on track. It's good. Okay, so floor pan foot pegs, I just had to rearrange that. That everything has to have floor pans except class 1 and 2 vehicles. That must have foot pads or equivalent. Maybe TJ, if you could weigh in on that. You guys, does snowmobiles, is it considered like a floor pan or foot pads?
Well, we have a pan. No snowmobiles I'm aware of have foot pegs, so they all have pans.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to put your foot in multiple positions when you're riding.
Yeah, this looks like a work must have foot pads or equivalent to keep the driver's and passenger's feet from in the frame. So okay, so we'll keep moving on. Muffler, all vehicles. So this is just changing, taking out the EQ and putting it in OPRD for the standards for mufflers. Roll bar, this is the issue with the snowmobiles too, is technically this is saying that a snowmobile must have a roll cage, which we all know that's not not what's happening. So basically just saying class 2 is Jeeps and sandrails and side-by-sides have to have a roll bar. I needed to add a little more language too. It says, except vehicles which has a seat designed to be straddled for the operator. And so sometimes an ATV, a quad, could, if you put a track on it, it no longer has pneumatic wheels and it becomes by default a class 2 vehicle, or if it's too wide or too heavy. So class 2 tends to fall into this default category of if it doesn't fit anyplace else, then it's a class 2 vehicle. And so so by adding this, it deals with a ATV quad four-wheeler that you sit on, you straddle the seat, and we're not going to require a roll bar for that. Then moving on, seat belts, it's the same exact thing. Class 2 and 4 vehicles have to have seat belts, but if you're basically on a vehicle that you straddle it like a snowmobile or a four-wheeler, you don't need a seat belt. Or yeah. And then tail lights, this was kind of weird. It had an uppercase L and it's supposed to be a lowercase because it went J, K, and then L. So we made that little fix. And then TJ, did you have a comment?
Yeah, on the windshield, most snowmobiles today don't have windshields.
Most vehicles don't have windshields, you're saying?
Most snowmobiles do not have windshields anymore.
Yeah. So if you don't have a windshield, you're okay. If it says that if you have a windshield, you need to have, well, if the vehicle is being operated on the highway, then it has to have a windshield wiper. And off-road, then the windshield must be unobstructed. So since you don't have a windshield, then you don't have to have a windshield wiper. So it doesn't apply.
Yeah, basically you can't take if it doesn't have a windshield, you cannot take it on the highway, even if it's just those little jaunts that you can take, I think like up by Sisters, where you can go from one path to another.
Well, there are some cities that allow snowmobiles to be on the road in Oregon.
Yeah. So
That's
this
small.
is not saying you have to have a windshield. This is saying that if you have a windshield, then there's two situations that are occurring. So if you're on a highway and you and the on a highway and the vehicle is equipped with a windshield, then you have to have a windshield wiper unless the windshield is 6 inches or less above the handle, the steering wheel. So if you got a half windshield, you don't have to have windshield wipers on that. But you do not need to have a windshield when you're on a highway. Like quads, none of those have.
Sorry, yeah, it's an if this then that kind of a statement.
Yeah. The second part is if it's being operated off highway, and if the vehicle has a windshield, then the windshield must be unobstructed. And we worked on this language a couple of years ago when there was another change about that, because there's a lot of vehicles that don't put on a windshield wiper on their vehicle, especially like plexiglass vehicles. So are we good on that? Okay, so headlights. So this is one that kind of got my head scratching, and so it says that anytime half hour after sunset to half hour after sunrise, you have to have your headlights and taillights on. So in the dark hours, you have to have the headlights on. The second sentence actually said motorcycles and multi-wheeled vehicles shall be equipped with a minimum of one headlight and one taillight. So it doesn't say they have to be turned on, but every single vehicle has to have a headlight and tail light. And I never knew that it actually read it that way, but the interpretation is you have to have it. So if you have a motocross bike, those don't have a headlight on them. And a lot of the youth machines, the kids machines don't have headlights or taillights. Some of them do, but some of them don't. So I think really what we're seeing on the ground, like if you're after hours, you need to have a headlight and taillight. But I think during the day, practically for 30 years, not every vehicle has a headlight and taillight. So I propose just to cross that off. Clint?
I'm not sure on the definitions, but is there any requirement for what light is a headlight and a taillight color like there is in the motor vehicle code?
I think Colleen can correct me, but I think it would just, those are probably defined in ORS 801 or something like that. So I think I'm not
I don't
sure.
have everything in my brain the way that Jeff did. Sorry, Jeff Greiner. But so I don't know the difference for off-road. I'd have to go look that up and get
I
back.
know that they're in ORS in the motor vehicle code, but I just don't know if you guys point to those statutes like you do sometimes, but sometimes you don't. So I didn't know if it's defined here or if you're going to point to it there.
Well, what I'm saying is I don't know if it applies to off-road vehicles.
And so all I'm saying is that you could have a red light as a headlight and a white light as a tail light unless you define it.
I know that the color of lights is addressed.
We can look that piece up in statute and look and see whether we need to refer to the statute or need to clarify around colors before we file these rules.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd say let's move on from that and we can look in on that. So the other part is when operating in snow, all off-road vehicles shall have a lighted headlight and tail light. And so this is new language, and this got brought up to me by a law enforcement officer in the last week or so. And he said that in statute right now, it says snowmobiles must have a lighted headlight and tail light. So anytime a snowmobile is operating, they have to have that. But ATVs, so ATVs are allowed on groomed snowmobile trails, and it does not say that the four-wheeler has to have a light. And that law enforcement officers dealt with like ATVs with no lights and there's limited visibility. There side-by-sides and ATVs, they're side-by-sides are not allowed on groomed snowmobile trails, but there's other areas out in the brush, old roads that aren't being groomed. So those should have a headlight and taillight. TJ?
So there are different forest districts that are allowing tracked side-by-sides on the trails. And we also have snow bikes on our trails that that were converted from off-road bikes. And the problem being is if you get some really snowy days, it can be almost impossible to see these people without lights on if you've got a snowy day. So it really is a huge safety concern. Any motorized vehicle that's on the snow really should have a headlight and tail light.
Okay. Any other comments on that? All right, I'm gonna move on. So this is something that TJ also brought up to me, and I just added this, and we'll throw it out there and see what you guys think. So it says a person operating a snowmobile equipped by the manufacturer with a lanyard type engine cutoff switch must attach such lanyard to their person or clothing. And so snowmobiles nowadays, most of them come with a lanyard that cuts the engine off. And I was talking to somebody who's worked a lot, law enforcement with Marine Board, and he's like, well, that law exists in the Marine Board for jet skis or personal watercraft. So I looked at the Marine Board's language and I plagiarized from that and just put in snowmobile, and I removed the life jacket because nobody has life jackets. So that would be the proposed. And so that would only be on vehicles that actually have the lanyard. So we wouldn't have to grandfather in old vehicles or require somebody to retrofit. So TJ?
So we had a incident on Mount Hood where we had one of our club members who normally wears a lanyard, but on this day she wasn't going very far, so she just hopped on the snowmobile and took off without the lanyard, and she happened to run into a ditch. And when she did, the snowmobile landed on its side and the throttle got pushed up against the snow. The snowmobile was up against her leg, and before her husband could get to her, the track had worn through her pants, through her skin, and all the way down to her bone. It happened that quick because she could not reach the cutoff switch because of where she was. And so she ended up with a hospital with a number of surgeries. So this is really important. And also as a snowmobile safety instructor, it would really be good on my part to be able to teach the parents and the kids that, hey, the law says if you've got a lanyard, you need to put it on. In addition, if you fall off your snowmobile, the last thing you want is that engine running and have it going down a hill towards other bystanders. So I think it's just a simple safety thing. I think it's really important to have it in the law for that reason.
Okay. I did talk to another law enforcement officer yesterday about this, and he said that he's been talking to other snowmobilers, and that's been a topic that I guess the snowmobile community has been talking about needing that. I think I saw Barrett's hand up. Did you have a question or did it get answered?
That I like that for M. That all sounds great to me. I agree with the safety issue. I was just wondering previously if you start that sentence when operating in the snow. I was just thinking about the number of times we're in the snow, quote, as dirt bikers. If when operating as a snow vehicle, if that makes more sense, or if I'm overthinking that, we can. I'd accept that criticism and we can move on. But
well, I think a snow bike is not going to be equipped with a lanyard, so they would.
No, yeah, I was talking about the headlights. I'm sorry, headlight and tail light.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Okay. Any other comments? No. Okay. So the sound issue. So we'll dive into this section. So again, we kind of going off of what the DEQ standards were, and I'll just kind of go through all this real quick, and then we can come back. So basically, I didn't use all the track changes of how we would change stuff because um, it was kind of a mixture of stuff. So, but basically what we're calling, recommending or putting out there is have a max noise levels 36 dB. This SAG, it's like Society of something Engineers J1287. That's the there's a paper. I actually have them right here. These papers that spell out how to do all the sound testing and whatnot. And that's what Chris Reel out of California, he actually teaches law enforcement what those standards are and how to do that testing. So the J1287 is for class 1, which is four-wheelers, and class 3, which are motorcycles. And then and that's at a 45-degree angle at 20 inches or half a meter from the exhaust pipe, and it's at half of red line of RPM. And yeah, just a steady throttle. And then the second line is max noise level of 96 with this J1492 standard from 2023 for class 2 and 4 vehicles. So that's the standard for like vehicles, car vehicles, and that kind of stuff. So it talks more about like you measure from the exhaust pipe, and it's more of a sweeping one. So I think you rev the motor up to like 75% RPM, and then it comes down. I think you rev it up and down in like 10-second intervals between that. So those are the two standards that all the other states are using, and those are the most recent ones. This was from DEQ language. No person shall operate a ATV with any of the following defects. So no muffler, leaks in the exhaust system, and pinched outlet pipe. And I was just talking to Chris Reel reviewed these, and he thought these looked pretty good. But one of the things he said that they've been seen down in California is muffler cutouts and bypass valves. They call them defeat devices. Um, and that's an issue. And so basically you have a tailpipe that runs down, and it has a valve that you can switch the way the air comes through the muffler. And so you flip a switch, and then you have open pipes. And so there's no muffler, and the sound just goes straight out. There's no spark arresting system, and they're extremely loud. And so I think sometimes those are maybe used in the racing world if you're drag racing or something, and you have a higher tolerance of sound. But and I'm not sure this was what Chris's recommended language was. I'm not sure this is what I wanted to say. I think if I th I was thinking that it would be better to say the use of, well, opening the valves of, like, so if somebody were to have a vehicle like that they race on a track, but then they're going out to the dunes, that they would have the cutouts, but they wouldn't be able to use them. So I think wording something that would say you cannot use unmuffled, I don't know. So um, any thoughts on that? I know Virgil, I know you have do you use cutouts on I know you do racing with your Jeep.
Okay, hang on. Do I use a what, Ian?
Muffler cutouts or bypass
No.
valve?
No, I just use really short mufflers.
Okay. Are they used much in the racing world?
They're used more in the hot rod world, I think, anymore. These newer motors are kind of tuned to whatever you want to. I don't think so. I don't think they would be used very often. But
okay.
Obviously, if you're cutting them out, if you're going past the muffler, then you're over the noise limit anyway.
Okay. TJ, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it just seems, I don't know why you need it, because you still have the noise limit. So if they do that, they're going to be beyond the noise limit. So I'm not sure why you need it.
Okay. Jody.
Yeah, in my experience out here, I've never seen a cutout on anything. Again, those are more racing and car racing and that kind of a thing where guy wants to drive it home, so they just, quieten down and then only take it out when they're racing.
Okay. Rich?
Actually, cutouts are a little more common than what people understand. We're seeing more and more manufactured vehicles from Ford, Chevy, and Dodge coming out with vehicles that have cutouts, the Ford Raptors, the RHOs, and so forth. And we do see that on the dunes. You're not going to see them with razors and so forth, but street legal vehicles do have them built in from the manufacturer. So if you want to address that, I mean, that's the only thing that I would see you would have to say in there. But I will tell you, just for example, Ford Raptor they have 4 settings on it, and even on the silent mode, it's pushing the 96, and that's straight from the Ford manufacturer. So, I mean, that's the only time I would see that the cutouts are used. I've never, sand rails, rock crawlers, anything here on the dunes. I agree with Jody. I've never seen any vehicles except for straight hardline manufactured vehicles, such as Ford and Chevy and Dodge, stuff like that.
Okay. Virgil, did I see a hand up, or anybody else have a?
No, Rich is right. I didn't even think about that. The 392 Jeep has a performance setting where you can flip a switch and it does bypass it still goes through the muffler, but it somehow opens up the system where it's a lot louder, but it's all street legal stuff. And of course, vehicles that are turbocharged have an advantage anyway because they're running the exhaust back through the turbo, so it's quieter to start with. And it will also be quieter at the RPM level that you're wanting to test it at. But once you actually are into the accelerator, it does get louder, but it's fine.
Okay. Eric?
I wonder, I suppose it's probably not been an issue because we have virtually no sound enforcement the last several years, but we're going to be asking folks to be significantly quieter. So I can imagine these things popping up. And my only concern would be, I would only add this if I thought DOJ advice was necessary, to help when confronted with somebody who tested quiet, but then went out on their own and, defeated that muffler, and then you encounter them. How does LEO deal with that? Do they need a tool to deal with somebody who then just turns it back on again for the test? That's all. But that's the only reason I'd have it there is if they needed it as a tool.
So that maybe leads into the next comment is this section C. So a person commits the offense of causing unreasonable noise with a vehicle if the person operates an all-terrain vehicle so as to cause any greater noise or sound than is reasonably necessary for the proper operation of the vehicle. So there's situations sometimes where an officer is out riding with an ATV and they're not carrying a sound meter and they can't do a test if it's raining, if the wind is really bad, they just don't have a situation to do that. There could be issues with getting consent of a vehicle to test it. There could be I've heard of officer safety issues of you have an officer and one person and 20 people grouped around him, and that person is their heads down trying to do a sound meter test, and people can come sneaking up behind him. So there's often situations where it's very difficult to get that sound meter reading. So this language, and I've talked to several law enforcement officers, and this is kind of that solution to that problem currently on roads. So this language that we wrote was based on what the road language is. So when you're operating on a road, you cannot have unreasonable noise. And that actually applies in the sand dunes on a sand road. So if there's a sand road and they're on that, and if it's too loud, then the officer can cite under this. But when you go on the sand, that no longer applies. And that the issue is when we have vehicles and they're going full throttle up a sand dune, that's where we're getting that loud noise. And the loud noise is happening on the sand roads are like 15 miles an hour and it's more regulated. So so I mirrored that. So it basically would cover both premises open to public and public roads. So Chris Real also brought up, and we don't have to add anything here, but I just want to bring this into the conversation. He said that there's having issues with very loud music, and he was suggesting that we have a rule for that. And I dug into it, and 815, 232 actually says you can't have basically a sound system that's plainly audible outside of a vehicle from 50 feet or more on a public, it says on a public highway or premises open to the public. So a public highway is any road. It's not just a highway like Highway 97, but it's a road, an alleyway, a dirt road, anything classified as a road. So, but then premises open to the public is things like the Walmart parking lot or the sand dunes or a trail. Those are considered premises open to the public. So we already have a rule on the books that basically says if you can hear it loud 50 feet away or more, then that's too loud. So this is sort of this, as we jump back to this language here, is basically saying you cannot have an unreasonably loud vehicle both on the road and on premises open to the public, which is the same as what is for the sound amplification. Comments, questions? Jody.
Yeah, my comment is this is beautiful. It's great work, Ian, because this is kind of a catch-all, and it's really very obvious to anybody when they're real loud, way louder than anybody else. So that takes a lot of the issue out of you know, those noise tests, because they're if you look at them, they're worthless anyway, because the wind's always blowing on the Oregon coast. So anyway, I love it. So thank you and great work.
Like when you know. And I used to work in the Tillamook State Forest, and one day this bike came into the thing and it was just blazing loud. And I went over to talk to him. It had like a CR 250 and the muffler had completely come disconnected of the vehicle. And it was probably like 105 and he didn't even notice. Like, it's like, oh, I didn't even notice it. I'm like, well, bolt that back together and we're all good. And so he fixed it. But when you're out in the field and you tend to learn what RPMs or what sound levels are. So Charlie, did you have a comment?
Yes, we have worked as neighboring landowners for over 30 years to try to get a handle on excessive noise in the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area. And Jody and I from Save the Riders Dunes, Shane from the Oregon National Recreation Area. The biggest problem that we've run into is enforcement. And I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself and wasting time here, but there's several thousand residents that are affected in the south sector, up and down Highway 101, Saunders Lake, the Shorewood, Hauser, Saunders, Lakeside, and North Bend. And we always have all these rules in place. We even went to all the effort to change it to 97 in the ODNRA a few years ago. Got the counties and law enforcement and the federal LEOs involved. But it always comes down to there's no enforcement. And I just wanted to say something about that. Is there a plan? And you and I talked the other day about this, Ian. Is there some sort of a plan to ensure that we can make all these ideas that you've put together in this wonderful program? Can we make them work?
So earlier I was talking about our funding mechanism. And so we provide funding for operation maintenance, which funds a lot of people out in the dunes and does patrols. They'll do courtesy sound checks and some of those, they're called FPOs, actually has citation and authority for stuff. But so we can work with them on that. I think there's a blend of education and enforcement. But if we give the tools to law enforcement officers that they can do their job and get that done. So we do have our law enforcement officers. We don't give them any quotas. We don't tell them you have to write a ticket for everything. And there's a lot of officer discretion in that, but we do track everything. We have a law enforcement tracking system that Jeff actually works with a lot, and we can get all kinds of data, like how many sound meter tests were done or how many citations or warnings were issued. And we also have a law enforcement workshop, which is in April, and it's actually going to be out on the sand dunes, the coast this year. We usually do that out of Central Oregon, but that's going to be a big emphasis of the sound meter stuff. We are planning on bringing Chris Reel up from California, and he's come up several times in the past and taught officers how to do that. So part of it is when an officer feels very comfortable with testing a vehicle and they know how to do that, they're going to engage in those conversations more. So I think it's a matter of us working together with the law enforcement perspective, from the education element, and there's some like signage, the engineering of stuff, and so you have the signs out there to tell people what they are. And then we will be updating we have an OHV handbook, and that handbook, I don't know if I had one here. Yeah, it's here. So we're going to reprint this after we do these rules. We're going to have this talks about all those rules and laws, and then our website, state park website, we can update that tomorrow. So
Well, Jody and I have worked for years, and we feel that if there was just a few citations written, we would see compromise, and it wouldn't affect the activity and the sport of ATVing one bit. But the peer pressure amongst the riders, we hope would get the noise under control. And that's Chris Reel has sat at my kitchen table several times, and we've tried to work this thing out in advance. And I think that compromise is the name of the game, but it's very difficult for the law enforcement with the search and seizure issue now. And I read here where you say unreasonable noise, but I'm thinking if you're sitting in front of a magistrate in Eugene and he asks that LEO, what's unreasonable? How are you going to define that?
So I think that's going to come down to the officer. He'll need to show up in court and he'll need to explain the situation. And so some of the tools that we're giving them it's kind of a little bit like reckless driving. And so the officer has to describe how they're operating, they're swerving, they're driving, doing a wheelie or whatever that is. So there's reckless driving is a little bit vague, but there's things that they can convey to the judge. So if we have our law enforcement officers, they're trained up and they're doing sound testing and they become very familiar with them, he can go to the judge and tell the judge, I've worked in the sand dunes for X number of years. I have tested 200 vehicles. I know what a 99 and 96 vehicle sounds like, and this thing sounds like it was 104, and it was very loud. That's the conversation between him and the judge, and hopefully that would work out.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a good plan. But if it's a voluntary sound check, like the Forest Service has been doing, that's like New Year's Eve having voluntary sobriety checks alongside the road. The guys that are violating are going to bypass, and that's what kind of happens now.
Yeah, and I think part of having the voluntary sound checks is that people see that we're doing something. Even they're like, I'm not going to get checked, but they realize that the Forest Service is doing more of that stuff. Most people want to comply with the laws. Most people want to do the right thing, and nobody knows what their muffler is, and like hardly anybody has a sound meter. I guess you can download stuff on your phone, but who knows how accurate that is. So hopefully that raises awareness when they see those voluntary sound checks. But then we give law enforcement the tools that those people who are just blatantly violating stuff, that we can take care of that. So Rich, we'll go Rich and then TJ, you're after.
I agree with Charlie in the sense, I mean, I live here on the dunes also, and through the years, I've noticed one of the biggest influences, and unfortunately, is the budgetary constraints with the sheriff's office and with Forest Service, because now, I mean, 20, 30 years ago, we would have had 30 LEOs in the dunes just in Coos Bay alone. And now we've got one that's shared amongst the whole West Coast, it seems like. And I do understand the frustration with that. At the same time, I think we need to try to work locally. Even Douglas County and Lane County can attest to the fact that the off-road industry has greatly increased in the last 5, 6 years even. And that's because of the type of vehicles, people being able to buy them. People that have never done this before are now stepping up and going, hey, we want to do this. And they can do it very easily. That would not normally been in it versus the guys with the sand rails. So I think it's a step beyond that. I do kudos to you because it did come up this morning. I was meeting with several people here at the front counter, and they did bring up the issue of the ambient sound systems, because literally doing a sound check on a pipe and all of a sudden a car goes by and you can't even hear yourself talk because the guy's playing music is getting to be a growing issue here on the dunes. I mean, we see it here at the store all the time. People pull in and their sound system's drowning out our sound system even inside the store. However, knowing the guys out here that are doing the enforcement, they're getting to be such a growing trend of people that, and with the lack of budget, they don't have the personnel to handle that all the time. And I think that's one of the constraints that they're getting involved with. So, I mean, I agree with Charlie in the sense of that. And at the same time, it's going to come down to somewhat the local communities are going to have to start stepping up and saying, hey, we got to start helping with the sheriff's office and everybody to try and get these guys out there. So I think it's going to take a little asserted effort, not just enforcement on the state parks side of this, but for the local communities to step up, say, what can we do to help our departments out to enforce it?
So through our grant process, we spend the most money on the sand dunes. So I think Coos County is probably the biggest grant funding of year by year. I think Douglas is after that, and then I think Lane County is third after that. So we actually a couple of years ago we increased Coos County's grant application. They added an extra deputy, and part of the rationale for that is they were having to deal with sound enforcement and dealing with that issue. So
to you guys, because honestly, it has made a big difference with the support of the with you guys with the state parks with that. And talking to Matt and the guys, they greatly, and we as a community greatly appreciate what you guys do, because it does. I've seen a huge impact that it's had in the last few years, and that increase that you guys did has made an impact in it.
And we also have provided sound meters to all the law enforcement agencies. And if anybody needs some, we can do more in the future. But I think every program has sound meters. So, I do want to make sure that we give Katie time to talk about the impact statement. So it's 2:43 right now. Katie, if we finish this at 2:50, that gives you 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, I think that will work. We also want to make sure we cover what the next steps are.
Okay.
So everybody knows where we're going, but yes, we can do that.
Okay, so let's go till 2:47. So we got 3 more minutes on this, and then I'll move on to the next one. So I have TJ and then Bradley.
Yeah, some of the snowmobile states on back east have gone to you have to have a placard on your exhaust system that's basically a factory approved exhaust system or an aftermarket system that's approved at a certain decibel level. So that's what they've gone to because they got tired of fighting with the actual noise measuring noise level in those states. And I want to applaud you for giving law enforcement a lot more leeway on this. I think even if they have just the fact that someone has to go before a judge, even if the judge rules against the officer, it's still a win for the noise issue. Just because of the amount of time and effort that this person has to take out of their day just to address the ticket.
I will mention that the snowmobile sound levels are going through like state police. It's in statute, so it's separate. So these rules do not apply to snowmobiles. It's just for ATVs. So Bradley?
I think once we start writing these citations for unreasonable delays and whatnot, we'll get around whether we end up going to court or not. I think the majority of people, as things spread pretty quickly, they'll figure out that we're enforcing this a little bit more, and I think it'll probably change.
I've had a lot of conversations the last couple of weeks. I've been doing tons of research, and I've had multiple officers tell me that this will fix their problem and they can do enforcement and get stuff done on the ground. Barrett?
And just briefly, I don't think you mentioned enough about your conversations with DOJ on this. Just wanted to have you talk about that.
Yeah, we ran this by DOJ. They were pretty good with everything. The biggest comment that they had was we put the year. So when we use the SAE, this thing that we reference what year it is, and this might be something we have to update in the future if there's a different standard. But
Yep. And I was talking about the unreasonable noise standard and taking a bite out of this problem of the search and seizure challenges.
Yeah, no, they were good with this. I mean, it's already a law on vehicles on public highways and roads and sand roads even. So any other comments? Okay, we're a minute early. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint, see what we got left. Okay, so our timeline. So first thing is the RAC meeting. That's today, July 16th. We will, I guess we'll rewrite these draft rules. We'll consider the input, things that we heard today, and then we'll have another set of draft rules that we'll put out for public comments, and that will be through the month of August for 30 days. Katie, do we publish comments like once a week on that?
Yes, we will put on the rulemaking website, we will post all of the comments weekly, and we can share with all of you. We'll share what before we post or before we file the draft rules, we'll send them to you so that you can see what they are.
Okay. And then we'll also be doing a public hearing. That will be August 19th at 5 p.m. So we do that after hours so people can, if they're working, they can make it to that. So Katie will be running that meeting, and basically you have 3 minutes to verbally talk through stuff. So Katie, I didn't ask you this question before. How do the public comments come in? Is there a website and do you fill out a form, or do you write a letter, or?
You can provide, we'll have a comment form on our rulemaking website, so you can fill out a form on the website. You can send an email. We have a public comment email, or you can write a snail mail letter. We take it any of those ways. We'll send out a press release notifying the public that there is a public comment, and we send an email to all of our interested parties. And so we'll send it to the ATV committee, and anyone, you can forward the information to anyone who you think might be interested in commenting as well. And it'll have links to the rulemaking site that has the form to comment and the email address to comment.
And we could take comments as good, like this sounds good and we like it, or we can have, something to change. So Tim?
Ian, just something real quick. On the class 2, during the sound test, the RPM range, I think that needs to be looked at, because I'm not going to set and freewheel my engine up to 5,000 RPM while they do a sound test. So that needs to be adjusted, and we can talk later on that, but I'm just not going to freewheel the engine up. Virgil can attest to that. That's not healthy to do to whatever engine. So
Okay, I'll follow. I'll talk. I'm more familiar with the ATV motorcycle one. I'll talk to Chris Reel about the very specifics of that. And there are some different levels of for different vehicles, I think, too. So, Colleen?
I emailed you and Katie. I put together the statutes for lighting and color lights. I do believe that ATVs, off-road vehicles, are exempt, but I cannot interpret statute. I'm not legally qualified.
Okay.
But I did email those to you just now as an attachment in a Word document, if you wanted to send them out to the committee for people to review. So
Okay.
if you have to go looking up all of the different ones.
Okay, I can look at that after the meeting. Okay, so we have staff and DOJ review, and then so that we'll do review after the public comments considering what was said. And then if we get everything put together, then our intent is to get it to the State Park Commission, which will be on September 17th. And then they would, if they approve that, then Katie would adopt the final rules. The new rules would take effect immediately. And I had just a couple comments that we do update our website, update the ATV handbook, and talk about that in the law enforcement workshop. So, Colleen, did you still have a question or your hand was still up? Nope. Okay, so I promised Katie 10 minutes. Now you only have 9. So, sorry.
I'm good. So just one requirement of the Administrative Procedures Act, if we hold a rule advisory committee, we must ask you what you think the fiscal impact of the proposed rules would be to anybody, particularly if you to small businesses. So first, I'm just asking, do you anticipate any changes in the economic or fiscal impact by the proposed changes in these rules? To whether it's to ATV users or to ATV dealers, to communities?
Virgil, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm not sure who you're asking the question to, but I don't think
To the
any of the
committee.
I don't think any of the changes in these rules are going to affect. It's not going to fiscally affect anybody other than the fact that if the police departments and sheriff's departments and Forest Service want to spend more money and time enforcing these laws, but I don't think you would consider that. They're not going to add a deputy to do it, so I don't really see how these are changing anything.
Okay, we just have to ask the question. So the committee members, I'm asking all of you to have your thoughts on any fiscal or economic impacts, whether it's to any state or local agencies or user groups. So Charlie, go ahead.
I agree with Virgil. I don't think it would have any effect whatsoever. It may even have a positive effect. Because right now, I'm a grandparent and I won't let my grandkids ride out from my house here out in the dunes on these big weekends. And I think it might just kind of change the culture a little bit and slow it down.
Okay, great. Jody?
Yeah, and I agree with Virgil and Charlie. I don't think it's going to have a major impact. It might get rid of a few people who are loud, but they come here to enjoy themselves. And most people are law abiding. And you get the 5% or whatever that's making too much noise. Then it's their decision to get out of it or get legal. And so I don't see anything. It's the same with alcohol. You know, the big thing was, oh my God, we passed no alcohol. We're going to lose everybody. And in fact, it increased because, to Charlie's point, you let your grandkids out when you feel they're safe. And so I don't think it's going to have any issue. And a matter of fact, it might enhance it.
Okay. Dawn, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that, I think there are a lot of writers in our community that are kind of fed up with the rule breakers. And so I think, you know, we've lost a good number of people who used to come here and enjoy themselves because of people who break the rules. And so, you know, I'd say 0 to positive impact over here.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for answering those questions. And we very much appreciate your participation as Rule Advisory Committee members. I will turn it back over to Ian to wrap up.
Cool. I don't know if I have much more to say. So, like I said, we're going to be reviewing this stuff, going out to public comment. We encourage people to give us, especially public, you know, positive reinforcement that this stuff sounds good. Or if you want to see something different, it's all fair game. So,
Our Parks Commissioners do look at the comments, and then they are the ones who have to choose to adopt these rules so that we can move forward. So your comments or any encouraging people to comment that they are that this is going in the right direction, or any areas that they would like to see changed is really helpful.
cool. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up the meeting for today. I always have an open door. You can email me or call me and we can chat more about stuff. But I will touch back with Chris Real on a couple of these things, and me and Katie will kind of work through where we're going to land on all this stuff. So I appreciate everybody's time. I know most of you are volunteering your time to be here. We know that's a workload sometimes in the middle of the day, so we really appreciate that. So. With that, we'll end the meeting. All right,
Hey,
thanks
thanks,
everybody.
Ian.
All right.
Thank you.